I thought I was alone in the woods until I heard it. A screech, then a shadow, tall and terrifying. Something followed me, and I almost didn't escape. What happened that night still feels like a nightmare. During hunting season, I make it a point to head up to Maine at least once a year and rent an Airbnb for the weekend. Owning a place out there has never really made sense for me. It's just one trip annually, and financially, it's not worth it. Renting is simpler. Besides, I'm not exactly seasoned when it comes to hunting. I'm still learning the ropes, trying to gain more experience each time I go. There were a few years when I'd tag along with my uncle, but his health has declined lately, and he's not really up for it anymore. So these days, I usually go solo. The most recent trip I took was back in November of 2022. That was the last time I went hunting. I rented a place close to a national park. I got in late on a Friday night since I had to work during the day, pack up, and then hit the road. By the time I turned onto the long, private dirt road leading to the cabin-style Airbnb, it was already pitch black. The silence was absolute. That time of year, there aren't any bugs or crickets left, just stillness. If you're staying somewhere as remote as this cabin, the nights are incredibly dark and eerily quiet. I pulled up as close as I could to the cabin, and the owner told me the key would be hidden under the mat. Sure enough, it was there. I brought my 2 bags inside the cabin and unpacked my things onto the bed in the 1 bedroom. It was a very cozy cabin, and the owner already had the heat turned up for me, which was nice. Maine gets pretty cold up there in November. There was cable and Wi-Fi in this Airbnb, so I set an alarm to get an early start at dawn, which in my opinion is the best time to find deer, or even moose if you're lucky. The next morning, I was up as soon as my alarm went off, and I was out in the woods in less than half an hour. Since this was foreign territory to me, I posted up behind a blowdown I found, some knocked over trees. Usually this would now be a waiting game, but I heard a man's voice call from behind me. I had a mini heart attack and turned around to see some man with gray hair, but who looked like he was only 50. He was approaching me slowly. He said slowly in a very angry-sounding voice, "What the hell are you doing here?" I responded. "Excuse me," he said. "Hunting is restricted here." I actually was unaware of this, and when I explained this to him, he said, "I watched you right up here. You best leave the way you came." This scared me. Every hunting season, I make a point to head up to Maine at least once a year. I usually rent an Airbnb for the trip. Buying a property just doesn't make sense for something I do once annually. A weekend rental is just more practical for my situation. I'm not a pro at hunting either. I'm still learning, trying to get more experience under my belt. I used to go with my uncle, but over the past few years, his health has taken a turn, and he's no longer able to come along. So lately, I've been going on these trips by myself. The last hunting trip I took was in November of 2022. I had found a rental cabin near a national park. That Friday, I got a late start. I had to finish work, pack up, and then hit the road. By the time I turned onto the long, private dirt road that led to the cabin, it was already completely dark, pitch black. There wasn't a sound in the air. This time of year, you don't hear insects or crickets, just complete silence. And when you're that far out in the woods, away from everything, the quiet and darkness can feel unnatural. When I got inside, I was almost positive certain things had been moved around, and the zipper to my bag was unzipped. I couldn't remember if I left it zipped up or not, but it was typical for me to always keep my bag zipped up. I just checked every room quick before settling down. I was way too hungry to just prepare a light meal, so I drove to the little village nearby and picked up some Chinese takeout. Then I drove right back to the cabin. I was planning on heading back out to the park at dusk. When I got back to the cabin, I just ate my food and went straight to take a nap. After my nap, I headed back out to the park. I spent about an hour walking maybe a quarter mile very slowly and wasn't finding anything. My uncle always told me you could find a deer or moose in 10 minutes or 10 days. It just depends on how many are present and being in the right place at the right time. Sadly, luck was not on my side this day, and so when it was starting to get dark, I packed up and started heading back to my truck. It was just a short drive back to the cabin. I cooked the pasta and meatballs I brought with me for dinner, as I had the TV on in the background. Then I laid down on the little love seat couch as I ate and watched some old black and white movie. While sitting there, I thought back to earlier, how the door was unlocked and things appeared to have been moved, only I didn't notice anything missing. I wondered if it was just in my head or not. Not long after this, I brushed my teeth and shifted to the bedroom, where I began to watch another movie in there, planning on falling asleep to it. I was starting to drift into that half-sleep state, where what was going on in the movie was actually starting to blend into this half-awake dream I was kind of having. Until I heard the distinct sound of a door clicking open that snapped me out of my half-sleep. I groggily looked up and noticed the closet door in the room was now cracked open. This immediately woke me up completely. Now the door being unlocked and belongings potentially being moved did not seem like a coincidence. I waited a moment, then got out of bed, went to my hunting pack, and grabbed my CC-75. I went back to the bedroom, turned on the light, and pointed my gun at the closet door. I yelled, "Come out now, or I'll shoot." A big part of me still didn't believe there could actually be a person in there, and I thought that I was just being overly cautious. But when the door actually pushed open, I was in pure shock. That older man from earlier in the day stepped out, and his unhappy-looking face switched to a gross smile, missing a front tooth. He said, "You got me." I said, "Don't move," as I went to grab my cell phone and call 911. Thank God I had service here. The sheriff's department was on their way, and I let them know I was armed and had the intruder at gunpoint. It was an excruciatingly long wait before the sheriff's deputies arrived. During that time, the man was telling me how he's sick of people like me having no respect for the parks up here. I had no idea what he meant, but I wasn't entertaining him. I kept telling him to shut up when deputies got there. It was an obvious arrest for breaking and entering and possibly robbery, though I don't think he ever actually stole anything from me. The man claimed the door was simply unlocked. I'm still not sure if what he said was true, or if that man somehow managed to pick the lock, or maybe even climbed in through a window. According to the Airbnb host, there were no spare or hidden keys anywhere on the property, and he insisted I must have left the door unlocked. What really got to me, though, was that he seemed more worried about whether anything he owned had been stolen than about my safety. He didn't ask if I was all right or apologize for what had happened. Even after I gave him the intruder's name, He claimed he had no idea who the guy was. Honestly, I still don't believe I left that door unlocked. But I thank God I brought my hunting gear. Having my firearm with me was the only reason I was able to act fast and stop things from going even worse. But first, did you know that 98% of people who watch my videos aren't subscribed? That means you. And yes, I am speaking specifically to you. Probably aren't. So now would be a great time to leave a like on the video and subscribe. Anyhow, I was 14 years old when this happened. It was my very first season hunting deer with my family. Specifically, it was just me, my dad, and my cousin out there. To give you an idea of the setup, my hunting blind was positioned about 2 miles south of my dad's stand, and his stand was another 9 miles southwest of our base camp. We rode out together on a four-wheeler, but stopped roughly 100 yards short of his stand, so I still had quite a walk before I could reach mine. I'm from northern Michigan, and up here, winter days are short. Darkness creeps in fast and early. Around 4 p.m., the cold started to bite, and I figured it was time to pack up for the day. I had my 2.43 rifle slung across my back. It had a pink camo cover and a shoulder strap to carry it more easily. I zipped up my hunting blind, cleaned up my things, and tossed all my trash into a bucket I'd brought along. As I was throwing away my trash, I heard a couple leaves crumble, so I immediately turned my head up to see if it was a deer. After about a minute, I brushed it off as a squirrel or a bird. Disappointed, I closed my blind and headed to my father's. As I was taking my first steps out of my blind, I could see a fresh pathway brush through the leaves. It was a wide path, not from a small animal or even a deer. I immediately started thinking a bear or a wolf, so I started speed walking to where my dad was. I started to panic as it started to get even darker, and I was still roughly a mile away. I was just walking, as I was stopped in my tracks by one of the most haunting and horrifying noises I'd ever heard. The best way to describe it was a bear/man that was being murdered. It sounded roughly 150 yards back as I started to run. Running with boots and thick hunting gear was hard with 20 pounds on my back, but fear pushed me through, and I didn't stop. Around 25 seconds later, I was still running when I heard it again. This time, it was louder and closer. At this point, it was completely dark out, with the moon being the only source of light. I turned around with my headlight, and what I saw is still the most terrifying thing I've ever seen. Around 50 yards away, I saw a black figure in the dark, illuminated by the moonlight behind it. It was around 10 feet tall and skinny. Without thinking twice, I started running while trying to get my gun off my back. I didn't know where I was running, but I just ran. I ended up on a road that I recognized as Rabbit Road, the road that connects my camp with the entrance to the hunting area. I ran on the road until I got to my camp. By the time I got into sight of my cabin, I turned around again and saw it again, this time further away. It was still standing up, and I can only describe it as a tall, black, skinny figure. It had long arms and long legs. As I got on my cabin steps, I threw up from exhaustion and continued to vomit for about a minute, as I later then passed out. I woke up to the sound of my dad's four-wheeler turning into the cabin driveway. I started crying as I ran up to him, hugging him. I quickly told him the story of what happened and how I ran back without stopping. He didn't believe me at first, but as we got settled inside, his face started to change as he saw the desperation in my eyes. I didn't sleep that night or for weeks after. Some people have tried to explain it away, telling me it was probably just a bear, or maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. But deep down, I know exactly what I saw. I'm older now, and I never go hunting alone anymore. These days, I always bring someone with me, and I carry a larger caliber rifle. It helps me feel a little more secure, like I'd stand a chance if something big ever came at me again. Looking back as I write this, I can honestly say it was the most terrifying experience of my life. It was a Friday evening, and I had just gotten home from school. At 13 years old, I was buzzing with excitement. We were going hunting. Hunting has always been one of my favorite things, especially at the ranch in Alice, Texas. I've been going there since I was 4, and that place holds so many memories for me. This trip, it was going to be me, my dad, and my grandpa. A few others would be there too, including the ranch owner's family. We had everything packed, and were all set to go. It was deer season, my favorite time of the year. There's nothing like the thrill of spotting a big buck right in front of you. And of course, pulling the trigger. People say that it's wrong to kill animals, but I disagree if you're actually eating it. We got to the ranch, and it was 10 p.m., so it was pretty dark out there. The ranch is 300 acres, I believe, and the campsite is an old little shack, probably the size of a normal bedroom. There is electricity there, but it's not a huge cabin where most hunters sleep in. However, there are little beds there, but one time my dad found a huge snake shed in one of the beds when I was little. So from then on, we sleep in a tent. The camp is surrounded by woods with a little field up ahead, probably a little less than the size of a football field. We use that field for dove hunting. Anyhow, we unloaded and chatted for a while around the campfire, telling jokes and whatnot. When we heard this scream, it was the most disturbing thing I'd ever heard. It sounded like a human hybrid or something. The screams sounded not too far away. All of us jumped from our seats and looked at each other. Every man there was freaked out. I could see it in their eyes. The ranch owner was the first one to say, "What the fuck was that?" He then told us and one of his family members to go check it out. He's a pretty old guy in his 70s, so that's why we went to go check it out. We took my grandpa's ATV and did a quick search around the perimeter, only to find nothing. I was still traumatized, and I was even scared to go in the blind by myself. As all hunters know, we have to wake up before dawn and get up into the blind to be unseen by the deer. I went to sleep in the tent with a gun right beside me. I woke up to the alarm and got ready. I was scared of being left alone in the dark, even though it was only an hour or two before dawn breaks. I was still petrified by the scream, and it still echoed in my mind today. My grandpa dropped me off at the blind with his ATV and left. My dad was already in his position. My grandpa's not a soft grandpa. He expects you to know it and do it. Him being him, he just left me in the dark, expecting me to find my way up to the blind myself. So I began climbing up the ladder and began navigating with just my hands. I got into the blind and waited for the sun to peek out. 20 minutes passed, and it was still dark out when I noticed something in the middle of the trail. I couldn't see well, so I thought it was the right time to use a night vision sight that my uncle had given me. I was excited, expecting a big deer, but when I put my eye into the sight, what I saw still haunts me today. I don't care if you believe me or not, but I was expecting a deer, only to find a person walking towards the woods. It was distorted looking, but had the same outline of a person. I don't know how it spotted me, but I saw it turn and face towards me. Now the night vision is not super clear, so I couldn't see its face, but I could see it was looking straight at me. Then what I heard next will stick with me for the rest of my life. Gave out the same exact blood-curdling scream as the night before, only louder. At that moment, I cannot describe the fear I felt. The word fear is not enough to describe how I felt. I managed to break free from whatever shock I was in, and managed to grab the .22 and started to fire the entire clip into the path it was standing in. I was still frightened, so I got my rifle and fired all the rounds into the path. When I looked back into the night vision, it was gone. My phone started blowing up with texts and calls, mostly from my dad. I told him everything that had happened, and it turns out he heard it too. So did my grandpa. We still go back to that place to hunt, but it's never felt the same since. That peaceful feeling we used to have, it's gone. Now I never hunt alone. I always make sure my dad is with me, just in case that thing ever comes back. To this day, I have no idea what it was, but whatever it was, it walked away from 25 rounds of .22 and 4 shots from a .243. When we went to investigate, we found nothing. No blood, no tracks, not even a single footprint. I know it was dark when I fired, but I'm certain at least one bullet had to hit it. And yet, it was like it vanished into thin air. It was the fall of 1986, and I was 23 at the time. Up to that point, I'd never really been afraid in the woods. In fact, the wilderness had always felt like my sanctuary, a place to unwind, disconnect, and escape the pressures of everyday life. I'd never had any encounters with Bigfoot, Skinwalkers, or any kind of monsters out there. And trust me, as a lineman working for a small town in western Kentucky, I had seen my fair share of wild things. Being part of a small municipal crew meant we all wore multiple hats, including handling utility shutoffs, which could get pretty intense. But never once did that kind of chaos follow me into the woods. For me, hunting and fishing were more than just hobbies. They were a way of life. Back then, it was a lot simpler to find a great hunting spot. All you had to do was stop by a landowner's house and ask. Most folks were happy to let you hunt, especially since deer were tearing through their young soybean fields. This was coal country, rugged, rural, and raw. And back in the 50s, there was a lot of strip mining that left a lot of land unusable for building and farming. So much of it was open for hunting. It was October 1986. Daylight savings time hadn't happened yet, and it was still daylight till just after 7 p.m. I left work at 4 p.m. and ran home to change into my camo. It was bow season in Kentucky, my favorite season. I was going to hunt in an area that was special to me. It was in an area we'll call Coon Ridge. This was a very remote area with broken farmland and wooded areas. After parking, I decided not to unload my three-wheeler and just walk 3/4 of a mile to where I was going to hunt. I was using a summit climbing stand, so I had to carry my stand and my bow, as well as my fanny pack, with my knife and flashlight. I had to walk halfway around the cornfield. The corn had not been cut yet, so I stayed in the lane left by the farmers so that they could get their equipment to the upper end of the field. The field was rectangular, and the upper end was a much higher elevation than the bottom, where I had to cross a creek with shin-deep water to enter the field. At the top of the field, the right-hand corner, was where I was going to enter the woods. It was the highest point of the field. I had to pick my way through a thick blackberry thicket, but managed to find a game trail that led me through, and it finally opened into a hillside with large trees. After finding a tree suitable for my climbing stand, getting set up, and a little climb, I was ready to hunt. I loved to watch nature. The deer hunting was just an excuse to be in the woods. As a lineman, I had no fear of climbing high, so I would get as high as I could. This time, I was up around 20 feet before the canopy started blocking my view. It was around 5:30 when I was settled in my stand and had an arrow nocked. I regularly stayed in my permanent stands, laid as not to spook deer close by. I had added reflective tape along the trail to mark the way out. This made it easier to find my permanent stands at night. But this day, I was in my climbing stand in an area I hadn't been in that night. I was about to start down when I heard something walking, so I waited. It sounded like a deer in the thicket, but I never really could get a look at it. It was 8 o'clock and close to a full moon that night, so from my high vantage point, I could see pretty good in the woods, and I felt like I could still shoot up to 15 yards, but it was after shooting hours, so I started down. As I did, I could hear the loud crashing of a deer that must have spotted me moving like a sloth down the tree. On the ground, I quickly secured my stand and bow and looked in the direction of the way I came in. I turned on my flashlight. The woods take on a completely different feel at night. Once darkness falls and your flashlight flickers on, everything suddenly looks unfamiliar, almost alien. It's not too bad if you're in mature forest with little undergrowth, but I wasn't that lucky. I was headed into a dense thicket. I followed the edge of it for a while, trying to find the same trail I had come in on, but I couldn't pick it out. By now, it was getting close to 9 p.m., and I was more than ready to be out of there. So I gave up on finding the trail and started pushing through the brush, using the moonlight as my guide, keeping it just over my right shoulder. Eventually, I broke through and stepped back into the open field, only about 25 yards from where I originally entered. I stood there for a second, pulling thorns out of my hands and legs, relieved that the struggle was finally over. But just as I caught my breath and looked around under the pale moonlight, I saw something. When I had first walked in, I'd come up the left side of the field, maybe 200 yards or so, then turned right and went another 100 yards or so into the woods. From where I stood now, on higher ground, I had a clear view of the trail I came in on. And I swear, when I first walked in, there was nothing there. I hadn't heard any equipment or ATVs, so I was shocked to see something in the trail, and no small something either. Looked 6 feet wide and 6 feet tall, just standing there about halfway up the field trail. It was the only way out, so I never hesitated. I started walking back to the trail, turned toward whatever it was standing there, hoping it was just a strange shadow, but it wasn't. I grabbed an arrow from the quiver, remembering my knife was in my 3-wheeler. I walked fast and never broke stride 100 yards away, and it didn't move or make a sound. I walked loudly straight towards it for 200 yards, all the while thinking it's really there in my trail, blocking my only way out. As I got closer, I can make out what it was. It was two people standing side by side, and this unnerved me even more. It was 9:15, 40 degrees out here. Nobody should be here. I kept walking, now 20 yards away, and I see that it's a guy and girl, maybe 20 years old, 10 yards away. I'm walking towards them, but no sounds from them. They just stood there. When I got to them, I half expected them to jump me, but they never moved. I said, "Kinda cold out here, ain't it?" No sound. They still never moved. I kept walking. I turned to keep an eye on them. I was thinking, okay, this is it. They never turned around, never even moved their heads. I crossed the creek, and within another 100 yards, I made it back to my truck. I was even more uneasy approaching my truck. It was just so quiet. All I could think of was someone waiting to ambush me, so I kind of eased up on it very quietly and watched it for maybe 3 minutes before approaching it. It seemed fine, so I headed to my truck. As I left, I tried to figure out how they got here because I never saw another vehicle. I tried to just put it behind me. The next day at work, during lunch, I was going to run and get some food, and I noticed all 4 of my tires on my truck were low. And after inspecting them, they all had around 10 to 15 roofing nails in them. I had to put tubes in them to get home. Something odd was going on in those woods. Somebody most certainly did this to my tires while I was parked in them. After this, it always felt like someone was watching me when I was hunting in that area. That's why I stopped going alone, and I never parked off the main gravel road again. I never found out who those 2 young people were or who punctured my tires. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more amazing video. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any updates. All right, that's it for today. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.